The advent of these online and blended environments, leveraging technologies, means that the age of personalization is finally upon us. Together, we work with leaders, teachers, and policymakers to advance quality new learning models to transform education. We are grateful to do it with partners who are doing a lot of heavy lifting on the future of education. The Gates Foundation has played a significant role in supporting some of the most innovative new schools in the United States for personalized learning with the Next Generation Learning Challenges grants and the Next Gen Systems Initiative. iNACOL was involved with EDUCAUSE, and the foundation is a founder in the Next Gen Learning Challenges program. In the initiative, the goals were to both invest in innovative models, but also to create a body of research, a body of evidence for understanding how these new models dramatically improve student learning outcomes towards college and career readiness. The Gates Foundation realizes it's important to invest in innovation, but also to invest in this research on outcomes to understand how to improve student learning. Today, we are honored to have as our keynote speaker, Vicki Phillips, one of the nation's great leaders in education. Vicki Phillips serves as the Director of Education, College Ready for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Phillips oversees work to ensure U.S. high schools graduate ready to succeed, U.S. high school students graduate ready to succeed, and to improve access to college. Phillips has built a strong education reform record throughout her career at all levels. From neighborhood schools to the federal government, for nearly 3 decades, she has endeavored to improve education as a teacher, state policymaker, leader of a nonprofit education foundation, superintendent of a large urban school district, and now as the Director of Education for the foundation. Prior to joining the foundation, she was superintendent of Portland Public Schools in Portland, Oregon. Earlier, Phillips served as Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell's appointed Secretary of Education and that state's chief school officer. She previously served at the state level in her home state of Kentucky, helping to implement the sweeping changes demanded by the Kentucky Education Reform Act of 1990. Phillips has worked with the U.S. Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and has been a middle and high school teacher. Born in Kentucky and raised on a small farm, Phillips, she has an amazing story. She was first in her family to go to college and earned first a bachelor's degree in elementary and special education and a master's degree in school psychology from Western Kentucky University. She also holds a doctorate in educational leadership and management from the University of Lincoln in England and served as a founding member of the Governing Council for England's National College for School Leadership. It is an incredible honor to have Vicki keynote today, and she is bringing 4 teachers from some of the most innovative schools with her and also facilitating a panel this morning. It is my pleasure. Join me in welcoming Vicki Phillips.
Thank you, Susan. It's really fun to be here, and it's only partly because here is in Palm Springs. You know, the fact is anybody can come to Palm Springs, but only a few get to come to Palm Springs and talk about personalized learning with the people who know it best and who are doing that work every day. iNACOL is a natural partner for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. My bosses, Bill and Melinda Gates, are obsessed with innovation. They spend their days searching for breakthrough solutions in fields ranging from U.S. education to global health. And iNACOL is a model of that innovation. You understand that it's not just the cutting-edge technology that powers personalized learning. Rather, that personalized learning is a philosophy of education that changes the way most things are done in schools, whether or not a computer's involved. And while you've grown in size, this is a very big conference for an organization as young as iNACOL. You've also grown in scope, becoming more sophisticated and ambitious about what this field is and what it can do for students. That kind of flexibility is rare, and it's one of the reasons we value you so highly as a partner, and we're excited to be working with you. I'm not going to talk long this morning because I want to get to the discussion with a panel of teachers who are actually personalizing learning in their classrooms. But I want to make one point by way of introduction. Personalized learning is no longer an insurgent concept. I love iNACOL's startup ethos, and I hope you keep it forever. But you're no longer talking to people who don't want to listen. As Susan said, you have made them listen. Now we have to deliver on the expectations you've created. And the research is very clear. High-quality teaching matters. Rigorous instruction matters. Opportunities for students to get individual help geared to their skills, needs, and interests matters. The challenge is this. In an environment of limited resources, in other words, in the real world, can we find ways to innovate that mirror these results for students on a massive scale? That is the organizing question for the next decade. Not is personalized learning a good thing, but what is the right way to deliver a rich, personalized experience to millions of students? In a moment, I'll announce some results from an ongoing research study of schools that are using personalized learning approaches. The results are just interim, and there's some important caveats about what we can and cannot infer from them. But I'm excited to be able to say that the data strongly suggests that personalized learning helps students do better. In both math and reading, students in the first cohort of 23 public charter schools made significantly more progress than students in a virtual control group made up of similar students in schools. And that's really great news. But now we have to ask, can a study of 230 schools or 2,300 schools show the same results? We need to keep focusing like a laser on how to design teaching and learning so that we can deliver on the theory of personalized learning with tactics that make it a reality in classrooms across the country. We have a lot more to learn on that subject, and that's where we need to concentrate our resources. As Susan said, on being rigorous about how teachers and students can use technology and other tools of personalized learning to generate results. What are the big opportunities to improve the models so that they most benefit teachers and students? When we solve that puzzle, we will have the opportunity in this country to remake education as we know it. Bill Gates sometimes jokes that the platonic ideal of education is Yoda teaching Luke Skywalker in the swamps of Dagobah. He believes that a combination of outside-the-box thinking, fully supported by effective teachers and excellent educational software, can help our school system move a bit closer to that Jedi ideal. About a month ago, Bill visited a school doing pioneering work in personalized learning, and he came back raving. After spending time in the classroom, he said, "This just feels right." At MS-88, a public middle school in Brooklyn, New York, an organization called New Classrooms started implementing a math program called Teach to One 3 years ago. Teach to One uses custom software that pulls in assessment data and information about each school's resources to suggest a lesson for each student every day. When Bill walked in, the students were looking at TV screens to get their personalized plan for the morning. The classroom's designed so that students can learn in any one of 8 modalities, including some that are teacher-led, some that are peer-based, and some that are independent. The principal told Bill, "I'm the happiest principal in New York." Keep in mind that she's a public middle school principal. She's not a personalized learning advocate, or she wasn't until her school was selected for this pilot with New Classrooms. This year, Teach to One will be in 15 schools, so it's still very much in the pilot phase. But the very early results from those pilot schools are intriguing. Last year, gains in math at Teach to One schools were 50% better than the national average. What's even more impressive to me is that students who started out with the lowest scores in math made the biggest strides. At the Gates Foundation, we believe in equity and quality, so we're extremely enthusiastic about any approaches that are able to advance both of those objectives at the same time. We have a long list of partners like New classrooms because personalized learning is key to the college-ready strategy that our foundation's been undertaking over the past several years. Our overarching goal is really easy to explain. Every student should graduate from high school ready for college, career, and community. Unfortunately, it's less easy to achieve. There's no killer app that can get us there with the touch of a button. However, we're guided in our college-ready strategy by some key principles. Many of those principles closely aligned with the work of iNACOL. First, we believe that supporting and rewarding great teaching should be a top priority for the field. The evidence says that having an effective teacher in the classroom is one of the most important factors in student success. Investments in personalized learning can leverage the strengths and expertise of teachers, freeing teachers from the more rote parts of their job and empowering them to spend time changing young people's lives, which after all is the reason they got into the profession in the first place. But the truth is, we don't yet have a clear sense of the role of teacher in personalized learning models. Technology can help teachers do more, but it works the other way around too. Teachers can help technology do more. How do we maximize the impact of a teacher who has more time to work with students individually and in groups? The idea of a teacher for every student is really powerful, but it's still an idea, and our field needs to do more to make that a fact. Another key principle of our work at the Gates Foundation is high expectations for every student. That's why we're proponents of the Common Core state standards, because they're based on the conviction that all students should receive a rigorous education. Personalized learning is about a more rigorous education for every student, delivered in a way that works for each of them. The personalized learning experience is designed to lead to college readiness, especially for those kids who start out behind. And that's another priority for our field. If personalized learning is about a rigorous education for every student, we need to get better at engaging every single student. What's the right mix of instructional practices, technology, and teaching methodologies to customize learning for every child? It's a tough problem, but one we're confident we can work our way through with people like you. At the Gates Foundation, we've been working with our partners to drive toward this next level of specificity in the field. Together, we've been trying to deconstruct personalized learning so we understand its most important constituent parts. And recently, we've arrived at a list of 4 pillars of personalized learning. Those pillars may change as we learn and grow more with this field, but the 4 of those are these. First, students have a unique learning profile, an up-to-date record that helps their teachers deeply understand their strengths and weaknesses, their motivations, and their goals. At Summit Public Schools in California, for example, each student has a personalized learning plan built on custom software that documents students' content and skills mastery, their interest inside and outside of the classroom, and their future aspirations. Students and teachers use this information to set weekly goals, and students and their parents and teachers can access that profile anytime. Second, students have a customized path through curriculum based on those unique profiles. At Acton Academy, a private elementary school in Texas, students participate in Socratic discussions with their teachers to devise that personal journey based on their needs. Students choose the types of technology they use, and they propose new tools as they find them. So far, they seem to enjoy game-based adaptive learning the most, but they're encouraged to go outside traditional programs to find what they need wherever they can, on the internet, from each other, or even picking up the phone and calling an expert. The third pillar of personalized learning and practice is competency-based progression. In the Teach-to-One methodology for new classrooms, which I mentioned earlier, each student engages in 3 different types of learning tasks to master the skills on their personal learning path. Pick-up sessions that are online or live instruction, task sessions that involve real-world applications of the material, and math advisory sessions which are project-based. Every day, students take an assessment on the day's content. If they pass, they move on. If they don't, they don't. The fourth pillar of personalized learning as we know it at this stage of the field, is flexible learning environments, which means that everything from how the space is used to the way time is allocated is responsive to the needs of students. At Nolan Middle School in Michigan, the classroom walls have been removed to create a large space for 120 students. The desks have been replaced with modular furniture. Student schedules are divided into blocks of time in which they choose which subjects to work on. 2 teachers monitor groups of up to 50 students, while 2 other teachers use real-time data to pull students based on who needs extra help. By creating more flexible learning environments, teachers' time is freed up to focus on deeper learning, peer collaboration, and more individual attention for students. The schools that are really innovating with these pillars are pioneers. They're finding out what works, what doesn't, and they're working hard to make things better. And they're showing us what the school of the future might actually look like. We've been conducting a study, an ongoing study of 23 schools, adhering to at least one of those 4 key pillars that I just mentioned. And the interim results are really encouraging. I want to be clear that there's some limitations to this study that makes it less than definitive. The sample size is small. There's only 2 years of data. We studied high-achieving charter schools, not a broad section of schools. And it's hard to isolate yet the personalized learning itself instead of unknown factors as the driver of student performance. But in spite of those caveats, the headline is really clear. Based on student achievement data, students attending schools where personalized learning is happening made gains in reading and math that are significantly above average when compared to a virtual control group made up of similar students in schools where personalized learning was not happening. In the world of statistics, the term effect size refers to a standardized measure of the impact of the intervention you're studying. The effect sizes in this study were very large, and they give us a glimpse into what's possible. And the impact was widespread. More than 2/3 of the schools studied had positive results. Finally, the impact seemed to be the highest among students who started out the furthest behind. We'll publish the report so you can look at the data closely. But in summary, in reading and math across all grade levels, the students in the cohort in the study came in below the national average. But every age group in both subjects areas improved significantly, and most ended up at or above the national average. A real glimpse, again, into the possibilities. We also asked teachers what it was like to teach in these schools. We'll get to talk directly to a panel of teachers in a minute, but I wanted to mention just some of those key findings. Teachers agreed that their schools focus on student learning and hold their students to high expectations. They said that the environment in their schools was supportive of the personalized learning methodologies they're using, and they felt very good about their ability to use technology. The teachers' satisfaction in the way the classrooms were set up to promote personalized learning was mixed. But the majority of the challenges they face aren't directly related to personalized learning, but instead they're the same ones that all teachers in all schools must navigate. The study will continue into next year with more schools and a greater cross-section of schools, and there will be more studies that others in the field will do. But the larger point is that we're continuing to build the body of evidence behind the work that you started and have devoted yourselves to for a decade. It looks like working to make sure that students and teachers have the tools and resources to create a more personalized education does indeed lead to more and better learning. Now we have to go faster and further so that we can reach more students sooner with models we know work. It may or may not surprise you to know that I'm a fan of science fiction. And one of my favorite authors is Isaac Asimov, the late Isaac Asimov. I found this quotation from him to be particularly powerful and particularly applicable to the work of those of us in the room. It's been my philosophy of life that difficulties vanish when faced boldly. You know, learning is fun. The thirst for knowledge is everywhere. Curiosity is powerful. If we believe that we are kindling a flame in our students, instead of trying to stuff them full of facts like a piñata, then we should engage them in what, when, how, and where they learn. Learning should be a partnership among classmates and wise and inspiring teachers, not a trying ordeal for all parties. Underneath everything, I'm optimistic about personalized learning because I'm optimistic about young minds. People love learning, and given the right opportunity, they will choose freely to do as much of it as possible. So we should face boldly the challenges that confront us, the learning we have yet to do, and keep on innovating. It's critical that we acknowledge where we have more to learn, and we set our sights on learning it. And it's essential that we continue to build new bridges with the rest of the education community. To make personalized learning as powerful as it can be, we have to work with everybody in this sprawling and sometimes quarrelsome field to help them learn what we already know about personalized learning. And we have to learn what they know about curriculum and pedagogy and professional development and a dozen other things so we can apply it to our work. At the Gates Foundation, we've learned a lot about the challenges of spreading and scaling big ideas. And sometimes we've learned that the hard way. More than a decade ago, we made a big bet on the structure of schools because we believe that students do better in smaller schools where they are well known. But we didn't focus as much on the pedagogy happening inside those schools. Some schools did, some schools didn't. And it was very clear that that subset of schools that did got college-ready gains for kids. And that work has informed our investments on rigorous instruction and effective teaching. We've invested over the years in charter schools and seen some intriguing and interesting innovations that have real power for student learning. However, it took us a while to figure out how to help charter schools work together with traditional public schools and school districts so that more students get a cutting-edge education. Ultimately, cutting-edge strategies only have an impact when they're linked to fundamental truths about education that we've known for decades. And innovations can only make a difference when many, many children have access to them. Remember, as encouraging as a study of 23 personalized schools is, it's only 23 schools, and that's not what any of us is here to do. We're not here to prove that personalized learning works in a laboratory environment. We're here to bring personalized learning en masse to America's students, to help all students excel. That means collaborating with the people who aren't at this conference so that we can learn from them and so we can make sure that they are learning from us. I want to thank you again for all that you do. We are really proud to be your partners. We can't wait to see what we can accomplish together in the next few years. Let's dare the seemingly impossible. And let's hear from a few folks who are doing the seemingly impossible and making a difference in their classrooms right now. Please welcome Tanisha Dixon, Aaron Caswell, Colleen Kennedy, and Brian Johnson with me to the stage. Awesome. As this group takes their seats, I just wanted to tell you a teeny bit about them as a group, and then I'm going to ask them to actually introduce themselves to you. They're all teacher leaders. They're leading teams or the design of new techniques and methodology and having an influence that goes far beyond their classrooms, although the most important influence they're having are on their students every day. They use a variety of the kinds of practices that we're seeing out in the field right now that seem to be making such a difference and really varying the ways in which they approach their students' skills, needs, and interests. And they just exemplify some of the best of what we know, along with many other teachers out there who are striving to take what we're learning in the field and put it into practice every day. So I wanted to start with them by asking you, can you each please tell us a little bit about yourself? What do you teach? Where do you teach? What subjects and grade levels? How long have you been teaching? Just give people a little bit of a feel for who you are.
I think ladies first.
So, hello, good morning. My name is Colleen Kennedy, and I am currently a 4th grade teacher at Kip Comienza Community Prep in Huntington Park, Los Angeles. And I am currently in my 5th year of teaching in a school that uses a blended learning model.
Hi, I'm Tanisha Dixon, and I teach in DC Public Schools at the Wheatley Education Campus, the jewel of the Trinidad community. And I've been teaching for 11 years. I teach middle school social studies, so shout out to all the middle school social studies teachers in the room. Woo! They're scattered. So we are a Next Generation Learning Challenge grantee, and we have undertaken the tremendous responsibility and task of redesigning our middle school to a competency-based model you heard Vicki talk about. But even prior to that, we had a lot of blended practices going on. Personally, in my classroom, I use a station rotation model, using a lot of digital content, because prior to having access to a lot of the high-quality digital content Vicki talked about, had to curate a lot of my own stuff, and it was really, really hard and really exhausting. So.
My name is Brian Johnson. I am a teacher at Summit Public Schools Denali in Sunnyvale, California, which is in Silicon Valley, just outside of San Jose. This is my 9th year teaching. I teach middle school math and science. Thank you.
I will clap for that.
Yeah. So we are designing a program that is sort of a mix of skills-based, project-based learning, along with the competency-based education for teaching content. So it's been a lot of fun figuring out just what that looks like for kids and how that works.
And good morning, my name is Aaron Caswell. I am in my 8th year teaching middle school mathematics at Middle School 88 in the Park Slope neighborhood of Brooklyn. All right. For the first 5 years of my career, I taught 6th grade math in a traditional classroom, but the last 2, and then this part of this year, I've been teaching in a blended model called School of One, or Teach to One, which Vicki was talking about. And because of that, I've had the opportunity to teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade all at the same time, which has been pretty awesome.
We might take this off so we can more easily pass them. So you hear this term personalized learning a lot, both at this conference, but more and more out in practice. What's that actually mean to you guys in the classroom?
So first, I think personalization or personalized learning is just an acknowledgement that each student is unique, and we've heard that a bunch this morning. So just getting that out of the way and acknowledging that each student has their own learning path, has their own styles and pace and all that, I think that's so important. That is personalization. Beyond that, I feel like there's so many options. I'm sure so many people in this room are doing lots of different things, but if we just start with that beginning, that each student is unique, we can go from there and try out these models.
I think building on that too is not only acknowledging that every kid is different, but taking that to the next step then of how can we teach them best? So giving them flexibility in what they learn, when they learn it, how they learn it, so they have some choices in the best way for them to learn. And then not only do we as teachers have that knowledge, but also empowering kids to learn that themselves and to get to know themselves really well, and so they can start to own that learning and make decisions about what's best for them and when they're ready for it.
So when I think of personalized learning, I think of sort of my preparation as a teacher. And when I was prepared to become a teacher, pretty much I was taught to sort of teach to the middle. You get that you're going to have your high flyers and you're going to have your kids who struggle, and you basically do something different, for them, but I think when we think about personalized learning, we need to think of all of our kids as having those individual personalities and needs and meeting them at their zone of proximal development. So for me, it was really recognizing that, like, I was really good at teaching to the middle, but how do I just tap into the potential to all of my students and give them what they need when they need it?
Right, and Tanisha, I love what you said about teaching to the middle, which is how the typical heterogeneous classroom works. But the way that I think of my classroom now and the way that I teach is that I'm not teaching to one middle. I'm teaching to the middle of every single student's zone of proximal development. That ZPD is the sweet spot for students. And one of the things that blended learning allows me to do in my classroom is to make sure that I have many, many, many different subgroups in my classroom. I teach all subjects. I teach 4th grade classic elementary classroom, and so I have different students who have different needs in math and reading, in subsets of reading, in nonfiction text versus fiction text, and blended learning in my classroom allows me to make sure that I have many, many, many different groups of students, and I'm teaching not only to the middle of each of those groups, but I'm also teaching to the middle of each student's needs. And that's revolutionary for my teaching and for students. That's incredibly engaging in itself for every single one of my kids.
And that they're not, oh, sorry. I want to use my teacher voice. And that they're not static. When I think about, you know, the typical elementary classroom, when you put the kids in the Blue Jays or the Red Robins, that's where they were the entire year, right? So when I think of personalized learning, you also have to think about flexible groupings as well.
So you guys can go in any particular order. We don't have to march down the line. Pick up the mic anytime you want. But the next thing I'd like you to do is just pick up from that and paint us a little deeper picture about your classroom. What techniques are you using? What role does technology play? Give us a little deeper flavor for that.
Oh, I guess I have the mic. So I have a station rotation classroom. We were talking earlier about the kids know what we're doing that day depending on how the desks look. Another revolutionary idea is that you can actually move the furniture in your classroom. And that was an aha moment for me. So sometimes there's a horseshoe, other times typically there are station rotations. So I'm meeting with small groups, and 4 or 5 years ago, I would have never imagined being able to speak to every single student in my classroom and respond to their understandings and their misunderstandings. I have students working collaboratively on a task, and there are also students who are working independently. I like to think of myself as like the conductor, so I have like my silent string instruments and the cacophony of all of the horns, and like I'm beating the drum in small group, but through all of that, we're using a lot of digital content. We're also engaging each other in those typical school tasks. I mean, you need your graphic organizers and all of that other stuff, but I think that the most important part of the classroom is that kids know that they are the drivers of their own learning, and I'm more of the facilitator in the classroom as opposed to being that sage on the stage. It's not me beating them over the head. They know where their North Star is, and how you get there is really up to you, and how fast you get there is really up to you, but I'll definitely help and guide that process.
So if you walk into my classroom just about an hour from now, you would see 3 different groups of students. So I also work with a station rotation model where I typically have a small group of students in front of me sitting on the carpet. That group can range anywhere from 4 to 5 students to 12 to 15, depending on the content and depending on my students' needs for that day. The rest of my classroom is doing a variety. The rest of my students are doing a variety of things. Typically, they're doing a combination of moving into a center where they are applying their learning and working on application problems, sometimes entering their answers online, working collaboratively with partners to answer questions that ask them to apply what I've taught them that day on the carpet. And then they're moving into an adaptive learning program where they are working with content that I am able to tweak to make sure it's working in tandem with what I'm teaching. So they typically use, in math, for example, we use ST Math, where they're able to work with content, and I'm able to choose. Do I want to make sure that they are being pre-taught on content that we're going to be teaching in the next few weeks? Do I want to make sure that they're getting extra practice with skills that they struggled with over the last few months? Or do I want to make sure that they're being exposed to content that I'm currently teaching and see it in a different mode, so that when I taught it in a visual and more auditory way, now they're able to work with that same material with their spatial temporal reasoning. And students are able to move at their own pace, and they're able to move in the way that works best for them. Students can accelerate and through content that they're incredibly familiar with, and they can also work more slowly and get more hits, and they get that immediate feedback. They're getting immediate feedback throughout the day, both from me, because I only have 6 to 10 students in front of me as opposed to a whole class of 27, and they're also getting immediate feedback from the software that they're interacting with every single day.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned feedback, because I think for me that's been the biggest change in moving to this more personalized approach is, you know, like you said, Tanisha, I'm no longer that sage on the stage giving. My job isn't to give information anymore, it's to give feedback. And I think that's the thing I've liked the most is no matter what I'm doing with kids, the thing I can really focus on is giving them feedback to help them grow and improve. In terms of what my classroom looks like, it really depends on what we're doing. And I think that's one of the neat things about personalized is that it does not look the same throughout the day. It's constantly changing. Even just like the groups of kids I'm working with is constantly changing too. So when we are doing our projects during the day, you'd see students working in teams through these projects. We've really set them up so that they are student-driven work. It's not like every group's doing the same activities on the same day. They are given the tasks ahead of time. We work with them to like make a plan with their team for when they're going to get these things done, and they just start to work. And then me and my co-teacher, we are checking in with groups, we're facilitating them, we're helping them out when they're stuck. But then we're also, because our projects are skills focused, we're pulling groups of kids based on their needs to do skills workshops to help them develop the skills that we're ultimately going to assess them on in those projects. We do a lot of like co and team teaching at our school, which I think is another really helpful thing with personalized education, because it just gives you a lot of flexibility in where you can be and who you're working with. Those projects are done through that student portal that you mentioned, Vicki, that we've created at Summit. We also I have time when I'm working on math with kids. We use Khan Academy. We do like a 360 math approach, which is kids doing the work on the whiteboards, and so I can like call up kids and check in with them. But they can also, because they can see what everyone's working on, they can support each other a lot too, which is really nice. We have some reading time every day where I'm checking in with kids. They're reading books on Curriculate, and I'm checking in with students on their reading, just kind of asking them some reading comprehension questions. But we also have students who work on Reading Plus to help them with their reading. We've really tried to, even with like our math support, our reading support, try to personalize that as much as possible so that there's different tiers of support depending on what students need. And then when they're learning the content, they are working through our system, our personalized learning plan system, where they work through different playlists that are aligned with the standards that all the teachers at Summit, at the different Summit schools, have worked together to, I'm trying to think of the word for it. Like we've gone out and we've like found the best content pieces that we can find, and we've put them all together on these different playlists, and students study through those, they work through those. And that's really like, it's up to them how they want to approach that. They can mostly work on the computer, they can work with teachers, they can collaborate with each other. It's very flexible depending on what works best for them. So yeah, it's a lot going on every single day, but I don't know. I think the thing I've really enjoyed about it is it keeps it very exciting and interesting for me, is like I get to do a lot of different things throughout the day.
Put it in this thing. So to give you an idea of what my classroom looks like, it is one giant classroom made out of 3 classrooms. I think this is a big piece of the model that we use. It's a very wide open space that over 100 kids can fit in at one time. So this very big open space with some partitions and some funky design and centers and that sort of thing. But each of my 300 students, there's 100 in each grade, have an individualized or personalized learning trajectory that they're working on. So their very first assignment comes from this baseline assessment, and then they come into this room, they get their first assignment, and they could be assigned a type of lesson. There's 7 different lesson formats called modalities, and on any given day, they could be given any one of these kind of lessons. 2 out of the 7 types are virtual instruction, the rest are with a teacher. So if you can just imagine for a second a big classroom with all these different little sessions going on, virtual session, live instruction session, task project session, and all of this is happening one time in one big room. At the end of each day, they take a 5-question assessment, and that's how they move on, or I don't want to say they don't move on, but they get reassigned a different lesson in a different modality on that same skill. So if a student isn't learning something through a virtual lesson, they'll be with an instructor the next day. If they're not learning it with that instructor, or maybe they still need an extra session, they're going to get a peer collaborative activity. So the variety of lessons are really nice and really wide in my classroom. The computer, the model, the School of One model that I work in, the computer algorithm does all the grouping for me on a very general scale, but once I get all of that data through their portal, I can then work within my group. So I just want to give you like one example of, I could have an assignment one day of teaching a live investigation, which is a pretty traditional teacher-led investigation type thing. And the computer will give me a set of, let's say, 10 students that are ready to learn this skill. Every student is in a session that they are ready to learn. But within that group that I get from the computer, I can then micro-group because I'll have the data that says these 3 students have never seen this skill before. These 5 students have seen this skill once. These 2 students have seen this skill twice, and maybe I think there's 2 more left in that group. I don't know, I'm not adding. But so within that, I can then partner, and I can work within that group. So the computer does that really well, but then leaves the rest of it to me to do that teaching. So I do the teaching, the computer can do this mass assessment and mass grouping every single day, so that when the students come into my classroom every day, they don't know where they're going or what they're doing. They go to a computer screen, actually a big TV screen outside the classroom, much like an airport, and they see, here's where I'm going with Mr. Caswell today in this section of the room learning this lesson, and it changes every day. So it's very fresh, it's very flexible, and it's really exciting every day. Engagement is so high because you get this constant changing of groups.
So pick up on several things you guys said, and Brian's comment about no longer being a sage on the stage, and talk a little bit more about how your role has really changed as a teacher, and how your relationship with your students has changed as a result, if it has.
That was yours. I'm gonna let you take that.
Well, as you said that, I mean, I thought, gosh, I'm not as important as I thought I was anymore. And it's true because I'm really just guiding the learning, but I think we're one-to-one, and you know, some of the critics of one-to-one argue that when you have a one-to-one classroom, you know, you take out that interpersonal relationship with the teacher, but I would say I get to know my kids a lot more because in our small groups, they feel more comfortable in a group of 5 or 6 saying what they don't understand. And because they all have that same need, we rally around that. And we talk about how we're improving. So I think my role, too, as not only like the sage, I'm no longer the sage, I'm the facilitator. I feel like I'm also a coach as well in the classroom, and that's okay. I think for a lot of teachers, like we want that power and control, like this is my classroom, you're going to do it my way. And once I realized that I could let go and relinquish some of that control, and I saw how much more engaged my students were because they wanted to control the learning, I was like, oh, okay, so I don't have to teach the causes of the Civil War from my 40-slide PowerPoint that I prepared when I was in graduate school with the milk of the thesis dripping from my lips, right? So I think that, you know, you realize that you become the facilitator in the classroom, and it's okay. And I just think about how our students are getting information now. Like, as I look out across the room, you know, folks have their phones out and they have their computers up, and it's not that you're not listening to this very engaging panel, but you are, I mean, you're doing other things, and I think that we do our students a disservice, because when we're talking about college and career readiness, why are we telling our kids not to have their screens up? We're just doing the total opposite of the real world, the world of work, the world of college. And so I feel like one of my roles too is to prepare students. So teaching them how to appropriately use the technology and what's an appropriate brain break, because I'm sure everyone isn't live tweeting where we're talking about, you know, you're figuring out what session you're going to next, or you're checking in at home and doing those other things, and that's okay. But how do you bring it back to what's going on in the classroom? And so there are a lot of those non-cognitive skills I know Summit's really big on as well, that we've had to sort of switch to as well. It's not just the cognitive skills, the content that we're teaching, it's also the non-cognitive stuff as well.
So I would say, similar to you, I don't think of myself as the sage on a single stage anymore. I think of myself as having a little bit more of that ability that every teacher wants, to be in multiple places at one time. So I'm able to make sure that my students are learning whether they are right in front of me or whether they are in the opposite corner of the classroom looking at a screen. And I know what they're working on, and they know that I know. I'm able to keep them accountable and celebrate their success very quickly, because I have that constant feedback on how they're doing and what they're doing. As far as my relationship with students, I would also say that the quality of my relationships, if anything, has increased dramatically, because we do have those small groups, because I'm able to have so many more interactions with students, and the interactions that I have are of that much higher quality, partially because I have the data, and I have lots of different data points about my students, so I know exactly where they are and what they need. So I'm able to give them higher quality feedback. I would also say that students are definitely able to be more vulnerable, because they know that they have more ownership of their own learning. They're able to say, I'm really struggling with this, and I'm having trouble with this concept. I know because I had trouble with it when I was with you and when I was experiencing it, and I'm hitting this roadblock on technology as well. So I'm understanding what I don't know even better, so I can ask even better questions. And kids are asking those questions and learning how to use technology to find the answers. So they're learning from a very early age how the world works, and that technology is a means to so many things. And they're learning that not only can they use technology to solve problems and to think critically and to run their own learning, they can also use it to communicate. They can raise their hand virtually on a screen and know that 10 minutes later, when I have a break, I'll come over and help them. They can ask a question and post something to a feed, and other students can respond and answer them and help them. They are learning to create, they're learning to communicate, they're learning to advocate for themselves, all using technology, which is going to be valuable for the rest of their lives.
So how has using a blended model changed my approach? It's changed it dramatically. I want to say the biggest area that it's changed my practice is the way I plan. In my model, I don't know what I'm teaching until the night before I'm teaching it, which is a really big task, so I have to plan every single night. There's such a wide range of content that I could be teaching. Even though I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I could teach anywhere from a 4th grade to a 10th grade lesson every day. So it's really necessitated that me to deepen my content knowledge and my pedagogical knowledge. But I now have exposure to 300 students as opposed to 90 when I was just teaching 3 classes. I had 90 students. Now I teach over 300. So I have this tremendous exposure to so many more students. I get to know them Surprisingly well. I mean, obviously not 300 students is a lot of students to know very well, but since the groups in my classroom are shuffled up and I have so much data in front of me, I do know a remarkable amount of those students. And one nice piece of my program, though, is there is a math advisory. Every single day when the kids take their quiz, they basically come back to their math homeroom. So I do have 3 homeroom sections, and I do get to know those kids on a very personal level. So there's a nice balance. I know them, I know their work habits, I'm grading their homework. I still know them in the same way that you would imagine in a traditional classroom, but I just have the ability and the tools now to do that for so many more students.
I think Tanisha, the word coach you mentioned really resonates with me because I feel like that has been, that's what I feel like I do more now is I coach students, I don't like teach students. It's interesting that you said you feel like you prep a lot more because I feel like my prep has totally changed too, but in sort of the opposite direction where it's not so much like every night before. It's more like on the front end, there's a ton of front loading and planning ahead of time. We spent a lot of, every summer for the last 2 years, I've spent planning projects and building playlists for the students because with our approach to both the projects and the content, you have to have everything ready ahead of time because you don't always know exactly like who's going to be ready for what and when they're ready. So you just have to kind of have it ready to go to start. So there's a lot of like front-loaded pre-work. But what that means then is like day to day, I don't have to spend a lot of time planning. I can spend my time checking in with students, reviewing their work in the evenings, leaving them feedback. I get to do a lot more conferences with like the teams and the projects and one-on-one with students before as they're writing their drafts and their final drafts. We have a mentoring program at Summit Schools, and we've always had that. We've had that ever since the schools began. But the biggest change, I think, is now with this new personalized approach and the data that we get from our system, we've set up our schedule so that I have a 10-minute check-in with every one of my 25 mentees once a week. And I feel like I have such a deeper relationship with them than I ever did before because I just know so much more about how they're doing, what they're working on, what they're doing well with, what they're struggling with. And I feel like I can support them academically so much better than I ever did before because I just know so much more about how they're doing. So it's really, and to be honest, like the other thing is you had mentioned engagement. Like engagement is so much higher than ever was before. I feel like I just don't have to deal with all those classroom management issues that I did before. I don't feel like it's such a more positive relationship with kids than ever before. It's really nice.
Can I jump in and just add on to that? And I think, and we've all kind of said this, is that we're all in a formal way having all of these roles are coming out. So whether it's coach, facilitator, mentor, these roles are now much easier to do, and they're obviously very valuable for the students. That if it's a time in my classroom where I don't have to be the sage on the stage, which occasionally I do if I'm teaching, if I need to do some kind of direct instruction, but if it's not, I can then focus on those values too, and teaching good note-taking strategies or just checking in with students. So it's amazing. It sounds like we're all doing that same thing, that we can really hone in on all of these different roles and bring them out in a formal way.
So we're running close on time and need to finish, but let me ask one last quick question. And Colleen sort of started this a moment ago. Just give me 2 or 3 phrases or comments, quick ones, about the impact this has had on kids and the difference that you see in your students in how they respond to personalized learning practices.
Okay, quickie. You alluded to this in your talk before, but that especially the students at the lower end are making tremendous gains, just content-wise, but also I see engagement is through the roof. I see students taking control of their own learning. I see students learning how to interact with other students that they don't really know all the time, so becoming more socially intelligent, becoming more curious, and taking more control of their learning how to navigate a very kind of what can be chaotic process. And even though we don't always measure those types of things, I know those are valuable skills.
I mean, we've seen the growth that you talked about, so I don't think it's worth going into that too much. But I think for me, the most exciting thing has been just seeing how much they've bought into this system, in that when I you know, and I feel like I'm still learning how to do this and getting used to this as well. So like if I ever like kind of slip back into that, like I'm gonna teach this large group of 30 students now, they get angry. Like they get mad at me. They're like, why? Like, no, like I don't need this right now. This is not what's best for me. Like I know what I need. So like they really, they hold you to it. And even if like I want to pull a kid, I walk up to a student and say, hey William, you know, come with me. We're gonna, like I want to help you with this science place right now. He'll like no, I'm working on English with Matthias. I'm about to pass this place. He's really helping me. This isn't what I need right now. So it's been really cool to see how much they've gotten to know themselves better and how much they have really taken control of their own learning.
So my heart is and always will be in urban education. And when I started at my current school, you know, the conversation had to change from if I go to college to when I go to college. And now I feel like the conversation has extended to how do we get our students through college? And I think that, you know, it was one thing to change their mindsets to like, yeah, okay, I'm going to college, you know, that sounds good, it's cute. But how do I get my students through college? And I felt like in a traditional model, we really weren't giving all of our students all of the skills that they needed to get through college. Like maybe they can learn to read, write, and remember, and that's great, but what are those soft skills that they need to help them to persevere? Like what do I do when I run into a roadblock? And I felt like in a traditional model, I really didn't have the skills, the knowledge, the dispositions to help my students with those things. And so with a personalized learning model and blending instruction, I think the students are figuring out who they are as students as well, and knowing what their capacity is as a student, exactly what they need to improve, and then me coaching them how they improve. And so if there's one thing that I can say about this new way of teaching is that I can't go back to the old way. I feel like we have like this professional and moral obligation to make sure that all of our students get exactly what they need when they need it.
Definitely. And I would agree with everything that has been said, especially in the to and through college. So that was one major shift for me coming to KIPP, is that is a major focus of our school and of our community, is what are the skills that students need, what are the high expectations that we're setting and holding our students to academically, and what are those soft skills. And I think one of the ways that blended learning has helped us to achieve that is not only in teaching students the grit and perseverance that they need to persist through these challenges, that they can also, that they can advocate for themselves, that they know how they learn best. And like you said earlier, students love learning. And beyond the surface level of, oh, cool, games, the thing that keeps them going and keeps them going every single day and keeps them so engaged is that they love learning and that they know that this is how they learn best. And they know that they're growing, they know that they're thriving, and they fall in love all over again every single day.
So, you know, at the foundation we believe, and I know that all of you believe, that teachers like this and the thousands of others that are picking up these kinds of opportunities around personalized learning are worth wrapping our arms around, and that it's worth continuing to do the innovation, to ask ourselves the hard questions, to do the learning we need to do in order to bring this en masse to the kids in this country and to teachers like these. We should definitely dare the seemingly impossible, because it's not impossible. Thank you guys for giving us some time this morning and for being such a great partner. And aren't they amazing?
Thank you so much. Let's give another huge round of applause. Let's celebrate this moment. Thank you.